All right, we are on to our third frame that we've been looking at as we've been looking at these different ways that we can frame how we see our organizations and what that means for our leadership. And so I want to talk about the political frame, okay? And again, Bowman and Deal talks about this. The political frame is one, again, that is focused more on political science. We're sort of thinking about the conflict that happens within organizations and what that actually means and what we can do about it, okay? So here we go. We're going to basically talk about this idea of the political frame has a particular perspective, okay? Organizations are coalitions. You've got different people working together to try to get things done and to push their agenda that may or may not be in sync with other people pushing their agendas as well. And agendas are not bad. We are tasked to do particular work, and we have to somehow figure out how to get it done. So that requires oftentimes us making moves that may be accepted by other parts of the organization and also resisted by other parts as well. It means an enduring differences among different coalition members as we're all trying to get our work done. The most important decisions involve allocating scarce resources. So there's limited resources, right? Like there's not unlimited resources. There's actually limited resources, which brings about the sense of conflict, right? Like how are we going to spend the budget that we have? Who gets what and how is that decided? How do I fight for what I want so that I can accomplish what I'm going to do? But I know that you have your agenda as well. So there's sort of that going on. Conflict is the central process and power, and the most important resource. So the person or the group or the coalition that has the power oftentimes are the ones that get to do what they want to do. So power is something that we have. It's not good or bad, but it can be misused and if we're not careful. So how do we actually use what power we have to accomplish what we're going to do? And then goals and decisions arise from bargaining, negotiating, and jockeying for position. Let me just tell you a quick story about a political frame, which is really interesting. We were trying to teach churches to really think about how they could innovate in certain areas of their lives. And this one group put together this great project that required them to put up signs that they were inviting people from the congregation to be part of this initiative that they were going to do. And this initiative was going to advocate for young people in really cool ways. And they put this all together, which was really, really great. What was interesting is that the night before, they put out these giant posters and signs in their church to let people know what was happening and to direct them to a particular table to talk with them about what they're going to do. But that Sunday morning, the treasurer came out and he put all the signs away. Didn't tell anybody, just put them away. So this team shows up ready for their big day, and they were super excited. And all the signs, they found them in a back closet. Okay, now we can interpret this in a lot of different ways, but from a political frame, can you see what perhaps is happening here? They found out later that the treasurer was worried that the funds that they were asking for would be misdirected from another area of the ministry. He felt like there was too much attention given to this, and he was protecting something else. So when there are scarce resources, when there are multiple agendas, when there are enthusiastic people doing lots of things, the political frame tells us that this conflict will come along and we need to do something with that, right? So it was just sort of an interesting sort of moment, right? Political frames are like, see organizations as coalitions, right? They're coalitions more than pyramids. There isn't necessarily a hierarchy. There's lots of things at play where people are trying to move forward with their agendas, their goals, their hopes, their dreams. It all comes with that. And organizational goals are multiple and sometimes are conflicting because they need bargaining and there's multiple players involved. So while there can be like a goal for an organization, we just need to remember that there are also these multiple goals at play as well, all competing for resources and attention and time, whether we intend that or not, simply because we live in a world of limited resources. Sources of power in the political frame shows us that there are all types of power. There's positional power. There's information and expertise power, right? Like, you know, like the person that does like takes care of like the IT or the computer in your organization, they may be kind of quiet and they may have like an office like in like downstairs in the basement in the corner of your organization. But if you need your email fixed or your computer goes down, they have a lot of power. Yeah, right. Control and rewards, like if you're a boss, you have that. Coercive power, there can be threatening. There's alliances and networks, right? Like who aligns with whom in a particular organization or church. That's really interesting. Think about congregational meetings. There's an interesting place to look at this through a political frame. The framing, control of meaning and symbols. So the way that we tell the story about the organization and where we're going oftentimes can evoke certain things. I find this a lot, especially in church organizations. Like we oftentimes frame our opinions in theological opinions. Like it doesn't seem like a big deal that you're going to do something on stage with regards to the music, or you're going to promote a particular justice issue in your particular church. But the way that that narrative is framed is sometimes framed with a theological lens, right? Well, we can't do that because the Bible says, or traditionally in our church, we typically do this, right? There are narratives that people evoke to give reasoning for why something ought or not to be done. And so this creates conflict, right? And then there's just personal power, right? The power that we hold as people. I think about that all the time, even as a teacher. Like I hold a particular sort of power simply by the fact that I'm an older white male with a certain amount of education and positional authority, right? All these things affect how, when I step into a room, how people experience me, how I negotiate that, and how I use my power for ill or for good, right? And so these are things that we have to think about through the structural frame. I think something really, really interesting, and I'm going to encourage you to do this if you want for class, is to actually put together a leadership identity memo. Okay, now I do this as a researcher. There's something called a researcher identity memo. But the leadership identity memo is a chance for you to reflect on your own power. What do you bring to the table? How do you use what influence or power that you have? Where do you tend to think about and take stock in where you've come from and what you hold and your experience and your background, and all those things have an effect on really how you see the power that you have and how you use that power. And I think it can make a really big difference in the ways that we approach other things. For a researcher identity memo, this is really, really important. Like a researcher has to know how they show up in an interview, because it actually can have an effect on the ways that a person responds, right? Similarly with leadership, I think that can be the case as well. The way that we show up, the way that we use the power that we have has a tremendous influence on those around us. And so we have to steward that well. And I think that's really important to our conversation. In a political frame, there's conflict in organizations. That's not something that's avoided. It's just inevitable. Okay. So it's natural, inevitable. Organizations can have too much or too little conflict as well. So like not like conflict all the time isn't really great, but that says something about the organization. But this idea of conflict is part of it. Political frame focuses on strategy and tactics in dealing with that conflict. Like how do we get along? How do we negotiate different perspectives that people have, or different agendas or priorities? How do we do that? And forms of organizational conflict come in all forms. There's hierarchical conflict, the way that perhaps boss employees or supervisors interact with each other. There's horizontal conflict, how we compete with each other, like competing ministries, and how we use the spaces in our church or the time or what takes priority. And then there's just cultural conflict, whether that's organizational culture or all other types of culture. Or sometimes there's just misunderstandings about the ways that we come at things simply because those are a reality in our lives and in our communities. Now, if churches are places that are supposed to be filled with diversity and a collectiveness intergenerationally, racially, ethnically, men, women, all those types of things, when we come together to find this sense of unity, the way we get there is not by sort of like looking over everything and sort of downplaying everything. Through the political frame, we find that it's actually through conflict that we make meaning. It's through disagreement and wrestling together, that we become more of a community. So this isn't something that we avoid, it's something that we have to learn to engage along the way. So when we think about the political frame, there's lots of ways to think about this, but the metaphor that's often used with the political frame, and we've done this with the other frames as well, is that it's a jungle, right? It's a struggle. It's sort of negotiating as we move along. There isn't necessarily a straight path, because we're going to be running into challenges and opportunities along the way. The central conflict concept of the political frame is power, conflict, consumption, competition, and it's organizational in nature, right? So there's this sense of tension that's within the organization that we have to think about. There's a sense of advocacy, right? I'm advocating for my position, my people, the people that I'm serving, the people that I'm working with in ministry that I'm thinking about. And your basic leadership challenge is to develop an agenda and a power base, right? Like, how do I use my power to negotiate the conflict that's coming my way, but make a case for what I am doing? So I find that a lot of times when it comes to the political frame, part of our job, and I use this language a lot, like, we're advocating for young people, right? No one else is going to advocate for young people. That's the way I sort of think about it. If I'm the youth leader, I'm the one that needs to advocate for youth and families. So I need to think about what they need. I need to represent their voice. I need to stand up when I see injustice, even within our community. I need to call out what's unfair. I need to champion what's beautiful, right? This is part of the political frame where we play a key role in being an advocate for the people that we're trying to serve along the way. Now, that doesn't mean I get my way. It just means that I'm also not going to, like, sit back and let everybody tell me what to do, like, because then I'm not being responsible to my calling with the people that I care about. So as we think about these things, like, when you think about the political frame in your context, like, where is the power? How is the power used? And where are the conflicts? I mean, it's just something really interesting to think about. How can you use this frame to help your youth ministry? What does it mean for you as you think about the things that you're negotiating? What are these frames' limitations, right? Like, can we be overly too loving conflict too much, right? Is there a point where we overstay our welcome? Is there a limitation to that? And then what's expected from youth leaders from this frame? Like, what are we asking our team or our volunteers to do in this frame? Like, how do they use their power when they show up? How are they aware of the power that they hold and how they're using it in small groups or in other things as well? These are really important questions to ask, because I think it shapes the way we lead, how we care for people, and how we advocate for them as well. So just a couple of self questions here. From a political frame, what topics get the most attention and energy? Where do you find in your organization or in your ministry, like, there are just things that there's always conflict over? And what happens in that moment? Like, do you talk about it? Do you avoid it? What's going on there? And then also from a political frame, how do others experience me? Again, I think that a leader identity memo can help you sort of unpack and think about that, and I'll attach it and give you some prompts for that. But I think taking time to think about that can be really, really helpful as you think about yourself as a leader. So there you go. Political frame. Great stuff here to think about. I hope that you try to use it and reflect on it this week, even in your own leadership context. See you soon.